Well, good morning, folks. It is 28 degrees on the week of Thanksgiving. Actually, it's funny, the high was 50. My car said 50 because my garage was 50. So in a way, for the next few moments, I feel exactly the perfect temperature for the day right now. Now gone down to 44 and dropping once it adjusts to the outside temperature. So I've noticed there's a creaking sound in the background. That is an object in my car. I will leave that to guesses what it is. Good news is I had leftover pizza for breakfast today. The bad news is no red pepper flakes. The privation I endure. Most upsetting. Good about the week. I think good things are in store. Time to be thankful. Personally, I'm thankful that red pepper flakes exist, even though I can't eat them right now. They're very good on a slice of pizza. Remembering sit-down Pizza Huts with the shaker of red pepper flakes and the shaker of Parmesan. You had to be there to get it. And in some wild parts of this country, we still have sit-down Pizza Huts. See them when I'm traveling and I never have the opportunity to stop. And you know, a traditional sit-down Pizza Hut is going to be a 45-minute wait for a deep dish pie, right? At least 30 minutes. You need to order. Nobody got time for that, right? Not when you're driving through a small town. Now, let's not forget, some Pizza Huts had buffets. It's easy to romanticize the Pizza Hut buffet, seeing as it doesn't exist. What do you remember? I'll tell you what I remember. I remember a lot of olive pizzas sitting up there nobody wanted. I remember a lot of thin crust, getting crunchy, sitting out too long, not tasting all that good. Because the quality starts to go down after sitting out in open air. You see this with any bread product. You set it out on your counter, 2 hours later, it's become an unrecognizable piece of rock or something. Leave it out overnight, you'll get real interested. This is what happens when you take it out of the bag? Wow, right? Well, same principle with the Pizza Hut buffet. It is easy to remember kindly and fondly, but I don't think that they were all the same and that they were all wonderful. They had their flaws, and they had the reason why they didn't last in the marketplace. A pizza can go straight to your house in a covered box. Okay, let's drive, buddy. You know, there's a lot of interesting things going on with Kias and Hyundais right now. I'm going to take a bite. insurance companies have had to pay tremendous losses due to theft of Kia and Hyundai vehicles after the TikTok craze. They said, look, we underwrote standard use of these cars, and thanks to defective manufacturing, these cars were stolen at a much higher rate, an unprecedented rate, and it cost us a lot of money. So we're going to sue Kia and Hyundai to recover our losses. Let's unpack that. We'll take a bite. I get that I could eat this later, but right now I have oven-warmed pizza, which I'm not going to be able to get later. And if I let it cool off, it'll be the same as it was in the fridge. And it'll be stuck reheating in the microwave, and it'll definitely never be as good. I gotta savor. So, Kia Hyundai lawsuit. How is it, and is the manufacturer's fault that their cars got stolen by punks? Not only punks, but punks who took the methodology for theft, shared it on social media, and made it a challenge for other people of questionable morals to go out and try stealing these cars. And it could be just a prank, like, hey, I'll go move so-and-so's car. There's a prank on them, just to show them you can. But it's not really funny when people who are probably on the verge of poverty and can just afford these cars, they lose their car. It's not going to be a walk in the park. They may not have rental coverage for a replacement. They might not have the funds to fully repair and restore the car to the original condition. It's just really not a good thing. You know, you want to make it funny, go steal these MDXs in front of me, because the people who drive these, they're going to be okay for a few days, you know. But stealing from the lowest rung of the economic stratum, I have not a lot of respect for. You're not a Robin Hood, you're a D-head. Anyways, how can there be a theory of liability? How could it possibly be the fault of the manufacturer that their car got stolen? Is it the bicycle's fault? I just saw a bike lane, right, with the painted logo. Is it Huffy's fault that somebody stole your bike outside the Quick Stop when you locked it? No. Is it the maker of the scooter's fault that someone stole your scooter? No. If someone stole my Cadillac from my workplace or driveway, am I going to sue Cadillac? How does this work, right? Are the insurers standing in the place of the owners? No. No, they're not. The insurers are in the standing of themselves as as indemnitors. Indemnitors for the losses of the owners. Were they defrauded by their policyholders? No. Were representations made by the manufacturers to the insurers? No. So where do they get off? I got the answer. On to the bottom. The answer is found in the regulations. Oh, you're saying, what are you talking about? I'm going to take a bite. You could eat along with me and take a bite when I do. It's not so weird. I don't know. I imagine it's not a good user experience to listen to me eat. But I got my reasons. So, federal law governing imported vehicles to the United States. You don't think we got control over what gets brought into our shores from other countries? Kia and Hyundai. Newsflash. If you couldn't tell by the names, not that that's a thing anymore, but these companies are not based in the United States. Obviously, America is a country of all cultures and names. There's no one type of name that is native here, but if you're a company that's starting out, you're not likely to call yourselves that. And it's also a well-known fact that these companies are based in Korea. So, how is it these cars were imported without including the federally required anti-theft devices? How's that for a hot take? Basic standard anti-theft componentry was not included in these cars. Why? The same mother effing reasons I keep talking about. Because what is the governing mandate of car makers? Reduce weight, reduce cost, reduce fuel economy. Increase fuel economy, sorry. Reduce weight, reduce cost, increase fuel economy. Any componentry that you can remove, you ever seen a blank panel in one of these cars? Like they just say, okay, for this one we won't even put in the whatever, and we'll just put a blank panel there, right? Unless people pay for the extra upgrade. You can have a very basic car, and there's a place in the economy for such a thing. Hand crank windows, whatever works. Fewer electronic components in the age of shortages and all that. This wasn't part of that. These were made well before that shortage took place. They tried to pull a fast one. They tried to skip out on their legal obligations. They also try to make cars that are as versatile as they can. If they have to have an assembly line for just America, guess what? Not so bueno. And they're certainly not going to add componentry for other countries that aren't required in those countries, because that's just a waste, right? They will only put on each car the bare bones legal necessity, or at least what they consider legal necessity for those models, right? And ideally, you have an assembly line that's going to be good enough for U.S., Saudi Arabia, and whatever, right? You know, obviously EU and US are not compatible, but a lot of EU makers, car makers, go ahead and make their cars above and beyond, and then sell them here for a lot more money, right? You're less competitive. But people buying a Volvo XC90 are not very interested in competition. In fact, you can go to Sweden, get your Volvo, and drive it around, and then they'll ship it home to you. It's the exact same car. I think it's possible that they mod it for America a little bit, but it's still, I still believe they're EU compliant. I believe it. I mean, their commitments to environmental work and things, I'm fully in belief. Mercedes used to be like that as well. They used to be directly imported. They'd follow the EU rules because that was the baseline. And then they would, actually they might have just been German rules before the EU. No, they would have been EU. I want to say they quit importing in the 90s though. And that's a close call. I'm not so sure. Not important. Anyways. The cars were lacking basic componentry that made it very easy to steal them. Why was it you couldn't use a screwdriver and a USB cord to steal other cars? Because they had basic componentry that doesn't allow that to happen. This is where the insurers have a case. Now, is it a slam dunk? No. But if they can get 40% on the dollar for what they paid, that's fair enough. I'd advise them to take 40%. If I was mediator or advising the automakers, I'd tell them to pay 50 to 60%. And if you can get it for 40%, good. Because you don't want to damage your brand. And I think that's the biggest problem for Kia and Hyundai is the damage to their brand for what this says about them. And what's their reply? I'll tell you the reply, but I'm going to take a bite. Hyundai say, we have replaced the components in our vehicles. In other words, they think by recalling the cars and fixing the anti-theft devices for the existing customer, that makes this a square deal. To me, that is such a sign of a cultural difference, because they are fundamentally missing what I call the jury dynamite. The jury dynamite is that one thing that can't be gotten around. It's that one thing that if you're trying your case correctly, you focus on it, you buff it out, you shine it up, you poke at it, you prod at it, you put it on a platter and lift the lid off and smile and smell it and say, look at that, folks, look what we got here. And what is it that we got here? Is it that we have a lot of cars that are missing the componentry? No, that's not the problem. The problem is that you sold these cars to our people in non-compliance of our laws. You caused massive headaches and inconvenience to some of the most vulnerable members of our society. If you don't think that resonates with the jury, you don't understand the culture and legal system of America. Because I think that is, personally, I think that is a jury dynamite. And you can't rehabilitate that. You can't fix that. There is no going backwards and wiping that clean. Unless you can blame it on some criminal actor in your company who you sent to jail, you're a stuffed goose. You can say, yeah, well, we fixed the cars, so we good now. No, it just means that you've taken remedial action, which often is inadmissible in court because it is prejudicial on the negligence front. If you try and correct negligence, public policy is to correct problems like that. So if you've taken corrective action to fix a problem, it can't be used against you. Here they're trying to use it in their favor in press releases. Again, probably not the highest quality legal advice being dispensed. And it's not necessarily legal advice because, let's face it, people don't listen to their legal advice. They get it, they discard it, and they move on. It probably is what happened to Kia before. They were probably told to install anti-theft components, but it would screw up your assembly line and cost you so much money because it's too late to add them in, or the supply chain to get them, to retrofit them to our cars, etc., etc. Do you want to have production disruptions to the tune of $5 million now and snake bite your car before it comes out? Or you just want to issue the car and see what happens? They may have made an educated decision on this, but that educated decision comes with consequences in a market as large as ours. And that's not even the biggest problem that this company's facing. They're currently under investigation for the number of recalls that they've issued. 16 recalls on automobiles over a span of time that is considered to be unusual. And let's talk about that. The analysis for an auto recall. I've talked about this before, I won't belabor it again. But it takes significant legal exposure. Let's say unquestionably compelling legal exposure for a company to institute a product recall. We're talking about defects that could harm children with, rear airbags or seats belts or something. We're talking about serious issues. You want to talk about the craziest? The craziest is when they issue product recalls. Could you imagine buying a car? I just bought a brand new car. It was hard to afford. I could have bought a used, something different, but I thought I'd spring for the brand new so that I'd have fewer problems, right? That's often the justification, right? You could have bought a used, Ford Explorer, for example, but instead I thought I'd go ahead and spring for the new Kia, whatever. 3 months later, you get an email or a letter, probably both, instructing you to stop parking your car in your garage, to leave it, oh my goodness, you guys, leave it on the driveway. Because it might spontaneously combust. How would you like to get that note? What are we talking about? I'm going to take a bite. Quite like merging in front of a lady who has her hand in her face because you can't see it over the sun. Stop her. Lion. All right, a couple more bites and we'll get back to it. stuns me is that people do not know the stories that I know about these cars. I don't know why these so-called recalls aren't being discussed. They're not being discussed on Twitter. They're not making the news outside of my obscure trade journals that I read on claims. So how can it be? How can it be? Well, for whatever reason, it's not being talked about very much. The regulators are looking at this and saying, what's going on here? What is going on with these companies that are obviously very slow? They're not based here, so we can't go and inspect their plants necessarily. They're dropping off these cars in our country, putting them out on our road, and they're recalling them, 4 times a year. What the flip, you guys? Why can't you get it straight? What's going on here? How can you possibly have this many engineering mistakes in a product in which safety is paramount? Another Hyundai almost hit me because I don't have any acceleration to get on the daggone road. I slowed down for you. Good guy. Anyways. We got issues here, right? Now, where does this get complicated? This gets complicated because cars are becoming incredibly expensive, as it is. The regulations keep increasing, which are passing costs on the consumer. And these two brands are some of the most affordable brands out there. If these brands weren't there, the access to transportation, I would argue, for a lot of Americans would be hindered. Yeah. The reason it would be hindered is because there just isn't a lot you can afford anymore. I mean, I'm seeing cars from the 90s for almost $10,000. Some of the cheapest cars you can find are the ones that started out cheap, right? Kia, Hyundai. People in college can get these cars. People who are high schoolers can get these cars. People on, pretty low wages can afford the payment in their wages. But what are the fallbacks? And are these vehicles even meeting baseline safety standards to be in circulation? If you're going to recall the product 16 times, I think we've got legitimate questions. Especially if our domestic market cannot compete with these. Obviously, Ford there's one next door to my house, a small, car. Other automakers domestically make compact starter cars. You see them advertised starting at $20,000 or something. I guarantee you Kia and Hyundai starting cost comes in under that. So we're allowing these vehicles to be imported, sold for cheap, and then fixed on the back end. What are we doing? What's going on? Not only that, so the reason they say park outside is because if the car spontaneously combusted due to the mechanical defect, then it would burn your house down too. And if the car can spontaneously combust, they want to only pay for the car. That's what it's about. They don't want to pay to repair your garage, from the smoke damage, and they sure as heck don't want to pay for your elderly relative who couldn't escape the house and died of smoke inhalation. That is the disgusting undertone to the memo that says, park your car on the driveway. Right? This is the real danger. And here's where I'm ticked off. Is that in the last few years, that memo didn't just go out once. It's gone out twice. It's hit my desk twice. 2 different times they discovered a defect in their car that could spontaneously combust the vehicle in any location it happened to be. Twice in the last 5 years. How can this be kosher? I don't know what to say to them. And I don't think that anybody who understands this or knows what I know has an answer either. Because this is madness. Never in the history of America have the big three ever had to say something like that. Never. Never have they had to say it twice in the span of a couple years. Never. I mean, it's appalling. Could you imagine the fallout if everybody who bought an F-150 got told something like that? Or a Yukon? Or anything? You would see it all over the news. You would see it on Twitter. There would be big-time brand blowback. There would be memes about it. There would be jokes about it. But because these brands are not, if this was Tesla or something, we would hear about it. But because these brands don't target the elite necessarily, there are elements of the brands that do, but those are manufactured in separate facilities and they're not subject to the recalls. This is a uniquely socioeconomic problem, right? The people who have these cars probably have household incomes of $60,000 a year or less. They're not the people who are getting their voices heard. And that's what I find, that's where I really find the rub in this whole thing. Is, these are issues that are going on under the radar. And the only people who are probably going to care are, Democrat bureaucrats for now. That'll change. And they're just going to keep getting away with it. Until something really happens. And they don't handle it right. Now, you think that there's been a house burned down because of a Kia? I don't know. But I guarantee you if it did, they came and paid their blood money and demanded confidentiality. Because you can't issue a memo like that and possibly deny liability. And I've been involved in cases with, I'll just say, a big three company where spontaneous combustion of the auto was alleged. It can happen. There's a risk for any automobile that it can spontaneously combust. It is a very, 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 very small risk. mean microscopic. It is so small that it does not compel me to make any changes to lifestyle or practices. That's how small it is. But we still find these situations, once every, 3 years maybe, somewhere in the country, somebody loses a pole barn or something, and they can't figure out why, and the only explanation is the 1998 Yukon that's parked in the back that seemed to start back there. No one can figure out why. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And it's a nasty lawsuit to undertake. Because you've got to somehow prove that something in that car went wrong, that they knew about it, that there's documents on it. They're not going to want to give you the documents, so you got to fight them tooth and nail. And at the end of the day, the most you're going to get paid is for a car and a pole barn. Well, guess what? That case isn't going to really fly. That's how we cover it up here. But if you go as far as to issue a recall notice and to tell people to park in the driveway, you don't have a chance in the world of immunity from liability when one of those owners has fire damage. You're stuck with it. So, on one hand, they're willing to accept responsibility for damages should they cause them, but on the other hand, they're causing them. Right? And if I wanted to be fair and charitable, I'd say when they discover a problem, they swiftly try to fix it. And if you look at the history of American industry, that's one cultural difference that I can sure as hell appreciate.